So hi everyone, welcome to the first of these monthly series of talks, workshops and debates called Our Future Climate Conversations. So my name's Emily, I'm the Climate Action and Outreach Coordinator at the Suntrap Centre, which is an outdoor education and climate centre based in Epping Forest. So I'm part of Waltham Forest Council, but one of my roles is setting up spaces for learning and discussing climate related issues, but also sort of to hear from others, particularly young people, as to what they feel like the priorities are in dealing with the climate and environmental crisis. So that's why I wanted to start the series with the debate. Young people can solve the climate crisis, but should they have to? So the youth climate movement is growing and growing, with thousands joining school strikes and taking action all over the world. And we know it's vital to include young people in decision making in a genuine and meaningful way without being tokenistic. But actually this can impose a huge amount of pressure and responsibility. So today we've got three speakers who've kindly joined us to share their experiences, their sort of work that they've been doing in environmental and climate activism. Sky, Eleanor and Amit, so thanks so much for being here. So I'll introduce them one by one to sort of present a little bit about their work, and then at the end we'll have time to ask some questions and open up for a discussion. So I'll pass over to Sky first. So Sky is from Fairborn in Wales. She's won praise from politicians and environmental activists for her campaign against throwaway plastic toys. She's also an ambassador for Surface Against Sewage. So I'll pass straight over to Sky to tell us a bit about the work that she's been doing. Thanks, Sky.
Hi everyone, my name's Sky, I'm 11 years old and I'm an environmental activist, and I've been asked here today to talk to you about my campaign to ban plastic on comics and magazines. But before I discuss that, I'm going to give you a bit of background as to where it all started. So I live very near this village, a village called Fairborn in Gwynedd, North Wales, next to the sea and surrounded by mountains. It's beautiful here. You may have heard of it or read about it, listened about it on radio programmes, or even seen it on the telly. It's a small village, just a normal village with a village shop and post office, and normal people trying to live normal lives. It's my home and I love it here. But this is no ordinary village. This village, my home, is under threat. It has been described in the headlines as the doomed village, and the residents are destined to become the first climate refugees in the developed world. This is my home. My dad's the postie here. My mum's a community carer here. Our whole life is here. And in my lifetime, Fairborn, the entire village, will be gone, taken by the rising seas. So climate change is on my doorstep. It's real, it's happening now, and it's been part of my entire childhood, which is part of the reason I'm here today. Media attention has been part of our village life for many years, and I regularly see journalists, reporters and TV crews out and about. My mum has been filmed by Greenpeace at her house. At the time, I was scared to use my voice and be in front of the cameras. As early as I can remember, I've picked up litter from the beach. For my 6th birthday, I asked for my own litter picker, which I proudly used every time we walked our dog. All of those experiences left me frustrated about what was happening to our climate. I didn't know what to do. Climate change was so massive and my voice was so little. Then this arrived. A horrible histories magazine covered in plastic packaging, plastic tape, plastic blister packaging and cheap plastic toys. Do something about. I could take action. I sat down and wrote a letter to the publishers, Kennedy Publishing, asking for change. It pretty much went, dude, this is wrong, stop it, now, PS, I expect a reply. A reply did come, which pretty much said, thank you for another letter. time the reply was basically, go away, kid. Kids like this stuff. Looking back now, I'm an angry kid that wanted to shake the punches to make change. How dare they try and tell me that I like this plastic rubbish? Look at it. It is made in China, put on a pallet, wrapped in more plastic, shipped halfway across the globe, stuck on a magazine with plastic tape, wrapped in more plastic, to be sent in our homes to be put in the bin. Okay, if I'm honest, when I wrote those letters, I thought they would agree with me and say something like, yes, you're right, rubbish, we'll stop now. I was maybe a little naive. The go away letter made me, in my kid world, absolutely determined to make them change. I knew that what they were doing has been written about me and my campaign, but this quote I think is pretty cool. Hell have no fury like a 10-year-old climate activist. So I started a petition, which was really easy to do on change.org. I shared it to all my friends, and I remember how exciting it was to get 10 signatures, then 20, and before long 100 signatures. People were agreeing with me I was doing something positive. And it felt lots and lots of emails and letters. The petition grew, 500 signatures, 1,000 signatures. My voice was growing. I contacted local papers, MPs, Surfers Against Sewage, Greenpeace, Kids Against Plastic, and loads of other people. Support was growing. Articles appeared in local newspapers. I had my very first Zoom meeting with Luned Morgan from the Welsh Assembly. Again, looking back now, I remember how nervous I used to feel before each Zoom call. A key moment was when BBC Radio picked up on my campaign. It was heard by a senior manager at Waitrose, who later told me that he'd walked past these magazines for years without really noticing them. He heard about my campaign and went to take a look for himself. He agreed that this was rubbish. 10 days later, just 10 days, Waitrose announced they'd stop selling comics and magazines with plastic tats. Then my world went bonkers. I was live on BBC Breakfast talking to 6 million people. Newsround, National Geographic Kids, Sky TV, national papers, it went mad. National Geographic even made a cartoon with me that you can ground. Other kids began to get involved and use their voices. The week Junior Science and Nature ran a poll directly asking kids if magazines should have plastic. 80 some kids left comments. I think magazines should get rid of plastic gifts because it is increasing pollution and is not degradable. It's also increasing waste. Isabel said magazine companies produce too many toys and most get thrown in the bin. Just because some people want them does not mean they are okay for our planet. Other kids started contacting me to ask for advice on running their own campaign. Raya from London was inspired to start her own campaign to ban wasteful packing chips. We had a Zoom call to discuss how she could promote her campaign, and so far she has gained 1,500 signatures. Back to my own campaign, things were about to get even madder. I made a video for Sky TV's FYI, which was really cool to make. I spoke to a producer over Zoom who asked me lots of questions. I never actually spoke to the interviewer Ella. Magically, Sky made a video out of it. I don't quite know what happened on the day the video was broadcast. Maybe someone famous shared my petition, but it went from under 7,000 to over 50,000 signatures in a single day. This felt amazing. Journalists spent lots of time on Zoom calls to Germany, Austria, California, and even Japan. Got in touch. And through them, I became involved in World Ocean Day for Schools, in which I made a video for the Assembly. This was seen by thousands of school kids across the country. Working with Common Seas, my next set of letters to all major retailers were accompanied by over 200 actual handwritten signatures from primary school kids who are getting involved and taking action by supporting me. Then something really cool happened. Awarded the Youth Activist Award by Surfers Against Sewage in their Plastic Free Awards. This was amazing. The media circus moved on, but the battle continued. only now it had a louder voice with loads of supporters. I continued to write emails and letters to CEOs and publishers asking for change. And guess what? Change is coming. One of my emails went straight to the CEO of Future PLC, a global publishers. Zilla, the CEO, replied to me directly, saying they had reviewed their policy and would no longer, in her words, include low-value plastic gifts. This was awesome, as it was the first time a publisher had described the plastic tag properly. Remember, I had been told that they were great, educational, and kids really wanted them. Last month, I contacted the BBC, as they are the licence holder for lots of kids' magazines. See BBs, for example. When I appeared on BBC Breakfast, the producer told me I couldn't actually show the Horrible History magazine as the BBC makes lots of money from them. Think about this for a minute. The BBC produces lots of environmental programmes, but they didn't want to actually show the plastic tag covered magazines that they license. Remember that quote from earlier? Hell hath no fury like a 10-year-old climate activist? Well, I'm 11 now, so time to challenge the BBC about this. I emailed the Director General, like you do, and 2 days later I got a reply from the Managing Director. He told me that all the BBC magazines are published by Immediate Media, and they were all working hard towards making their magazines sustainable. He also offered to share details of the plans with me, if I would like them to. This was sounding a bit more positive, so I replied and said that I'd love for them to share their plans, obviously. Amazingly, this is what followed. As a result of my campaign, Immediate Media had produced an entire document outlining their plans to make cover mounts sustainable. They have developed new sustainable gifts made from cardboard. These look so much better than the old plastic tags. Their summary emphasises that environmental concerns are increasing, and although they have made positive steps forward and delivered good results, we need to increase the pace of our journey. It also states they must adopt a 4-pillar strategy to remove. This is pretty amazing and exciting for me. They have agreed that they have to change. They have agreed that they have to change quicker, and they have agreed that the cover mounts have to be made from sustainable materials. This is awesome news. So I took the cover mount policy from Immediate Media and emailed a copy to Kennedy Publishing. Remember them? The Horrible Histories publishers. I thought they might like to take a look and see what other publishers were doing. They replied saying that they were working with Immediate Media and the publishing industry to all achieve the same sustainable goals. So it looks like the campaign to ban plastic from comics and magazines is going to be successful. First, Waitrose agreed. As a result of Waitrose agreeing, Immediate Media produces a policy to become sustainable. Future PLC agreed to stop using plastic packaging and plastic gifts. Horrible Histories offer a gift-free option to subscribers, whilst other publishers come up with their own cover mount policies. And just last month, Redan Publishing released their first paper-based cover mount on a publication. This is amazing news. It looks like all the children's magazine publishers are coming on board with this. I can't quite believe it, but I want to put this in some kind of perspective. Immediate Media alone sells almost 250,000 magazines a month. If we add in all the other kids' magazine publications, we're getting close to 500,000 magazines a month. This one Horrible Histories magazine has 10 pieces of plastic on it. Think about it. Around 5 million pieces of plastic every month, 60 million pieces of plastic each year removed from production. Unbelievable. But this is just the UK. And now my attention is looking towards other countries and inspiring other young people across the globe to challenge publishers where they live. The battle will continue. Who would have thought just over a year after writing an angry letter to a publisher, an 11-year-old kid would be changing publishers, retailers and media companies? You can make a difference. You can have your voice heard. You can make change. Just do something. Individually, we are one drop. Together, we are an ocean. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sky. That was amazing to hear that journey that you've been on, and how amazing that sort of one first step, how that can sort of spiral into something so much bigger than you could have ever thought. And I think that sort of translation of anger and anxiety into action is a real lesson that we can all take on board. So thank you so much for sharing that. So I'll now move over to Amit Singh, who's a health and climate justice activist and medical student at UEA. He organises for a just green transition for a healthier future with Green New Deal, Health for a Green New Deal, the People's Health Movement, and Students for Global Health. So I'll pass over to Amit to present about his work. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen quickly. Can you guys all see that? Fantastic. So I don't think I can match the wonderful story that Sky just told. I think that was absolutely amazing, but I'll do my best to try to bring what I can to the conversation as well. So I'll talk a little bit first off about who Green New Deal are, because I'm talking on behalf of them today, and I'll go into talking about myself as well. So Green New Deal is an organization that focuses on pushing forward, surprisingly enough, the Green New Deal into Parliament on our national level. Our story basically is just that we're young people from all walks of life, all across the country, all across the globe, really, when you think about it, and we refuse to be silenced. We've been pushing hard for many years now, and not enough has been done. So we're mobilizing together and coming together to fight for a Green New Deal for an economic just transition. Because when we talk about climate change, we're not just talking about the future impacts of climate change, but also the current impacts, as well as ensuring that the transition that we have is safe for the people around us, and our jobs, our families, our communities need to be taken care of in that process. So long story short, we're fighting for a Green New Deal, and we are Green New Deal Rising. So what really is the Green New Deal, and what is our action plan, I suppose, for the next few years? There's 5 main goals behind this. One, obviously enough, is to reduce emissions, because emissions are, damaging our planet in many ways and leading to, just huge levels of destruction. So we're working towards improving our energy systems, our transport systems, housing systems, food systems, our healthcare systems. That's one of the ones that I work on as actively as I can as well. And we're trying to create a full transition across all the different institutions, all the different parts that bring together our society. And the second part is, when we do that, we have to make sure that our public still have access to food and to a healthy lifestyle, right? And that includes, of course, having a secure, well-paid job. The important part here is secure, because everyone says well-paid, but they miss out the idea of, if you don't have a secure job, there's a lot of stress around that idea as well, and that leads to a lot of what we call in medicine unhealthy behaviors, right? So it's really, really important that we have secure and well-paid jobs. Thirdly, building thriving public services. So again, just as we transition all these things, they have to be healthy, they have to be accessible for everyone, regardless of where you come from. They have to be present. Firstly, look at our transport systems currently, and you're waiting for ages for buses to come in certain areas, and it's just not practical for someone, especially if you can't afford a car or don't have a car and you have to use a bus. There's a big level of inequality, a lot of unfairness basically in that space there as well. So we recognize that, and we're pushing against that as well throughout this transition. On top of that, that leads very well onto the idea of the amount of inequality that we have in our society currently. We've seen through a whole range of protests, really, from the Stonewall protest in the past, the LGBTQ community, the Black Lives Matter protests, and all these other protests against a range of injustices. And we realized that the climate crisis is linked to all these other disasters that we're facing in our society. We want to put everything together and put our energy together towards resisting all of these together, because they are interlinked. They're all interconnected, and we can't fight for one without fighting for the other. So that's really, really important to us. And we do that on a community-based level, because we believe that the more community-based it is, the healthier it is. You know, you can work together much better as a community. Right now, we've got, I think, about 7, 8 people in the room, and that's perfect. You know, we can have a healthy conversation, a healthy dialogue, learn from each other. It's really good to have small spaces where we can engage and work together. Finally, this isn't just about the UK. You know, the world is being impacted by this crisis. There are indigenous people across the globe being damaged heavily. There are people in the global south being damaged heavily. And it's important that we support the global climate justice movements as well, especially recognizing the role that the UK has had in its past and in its current state in leading to this disaster that's impacting, you know, many a country. So that's what our 10-year plan is, and that's what we're pushing for. So I guess the question now is, how do we actually want to achieve this? You know, the first part is very exciting, which is to disrupt the narrative by challenging politicians. A lot of politicians really like to stay on the fence. For example, Keir Starmer has been doing this in the past as well, leader of the Labour Party. He likes to stay on the fence about which side he supports, so he doesn't get, you know, told off by either sides. But the reality is, as I'm sure everyone in this room already knows, we can't wait any longer. This disaster has already gone on for too long, and the impacts of it are terrifying, really. So we push MPs and politicians to pick a side and make their statement out loud, because that makes all the difference. So we will find MPs, we'll talk to them, we'll engage with them, and try to, you know, present the reasoning for why a Green New Deal is necessary and why they should also join the fight for a Green New Deal. We also talk to people in our community. You know, we go knocking on doors, we talk to people online, we do the whole lot. We come here in these groups as well, and we like to talk to you guys and really have a rapport with the other side, because again, we don't think a solution exists without the community progress together. On top of that, we want to elect Green New Deal champions including people like Clive Lewis, people like Caroline Lucas. There are Green New Deal champions, MPs currently in place that are really fighting for the Green New Deal in Parliament, and we want to work with them, because the reality is, no matter what we do, the fight has to be within Parliament as well as outside of it. So we try to engage with them as much as we can, again, on policies, legislation, and all these, these big words that come out technically, because that is how we will be able to enforce a Green New Deal legally and on a national level. And the simple definition really is that we want to make this a defining issue of our generation. Like Sky said, the climate crisis is on our doorsteps, some more than others. And it's vital that we all.
I'm in.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think someone was unmuted, but
That's
I
okay.
think you
Okay.
should be right now.
No worries. But yeah, I'm just saying that we want to really make sure that this is a defining situation in our generation, because whether we want to or not, we have to fight for it. There's no choice left. So I guess now that I've talked about the organization that I've been working with, the question really is, who am I? I've been kind of hiding in the corner over here this whole time. My name is Amit Singh. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a climate justice activist as well as a second-year medical student at the University of East Anglia in Norwich. I work on a range of different issues, but the one that I've been engaging with most and that I've been most passionate about is climate change and health. So I've been working with organizations such as, Health for Green New Deal, People's Health Movement, and a few other, organizations with very large, extensive names and lots of abbreviations that work towards recognizing the health impacts of climate change, as well as how that translates into the broader aspect of climate change. We definitely recognize the plastic pollution led by the NHS and stuff like that, but we also recognize the mental health impacts of the climate crisis. We recognize the impacts of living in certain areas and how that will, threaten your relationship with climate change and things like that. So we want to really bring those relationships in. We want also to bring in what the impact of the history and today's current status has been in leading to the health crises. The colonization of most of the globe really has been incredibly damaging and dangerous, and has led to many health issues and continue to do so. So try to talk about that as well. So yeah, my work is focused around health justice and climate justice, lobbying parliamentarians, talking to them, challenging MPs as well. I think I shouted out Alex Sharma once at COP26, which was a good bit of fun afterwards, stressful at the time. You know, organizing events, developing training, all that fun stuff that we get up to. And I guess the question is, why health justice? One answer is, of course, I'm a medical student. That's where my work has been, and that's where my experience is. But when we look into it, there is so much of an impact of climate change on our societies in regards to health, right? The first ever legally identified case of climate change related death was, unfortunately, I believe she was 11 years old as well, Ella Deborah in London. And that was a result of air pollution causing an asthma attack. And that road, I believe, had illegal levels of air pollution there anyways. And this was, the court finally recognized it as a climate change related death, which was a really sad and horrible, but a remarkable point in our history in recognizing the threat this poses to us. Flooding, of course, we'll talk about that already a little bit, but flooding is a huge risk as well. Hospitals will get shut down. And if you go further out to other countries, not only will they get shut down, they will break apart. It's not like they're being shut down for a day or two when there's a flood. They will literally crumble on the seashore in a lot of places, right? Yeah, and that's a huge threat as well. So that's why we want to focus on the health, because we realize that everyone needs a healthy lifestyle. No one can deny that, and this is a crisis that's the biggest risk to our health. Just quickly noticing here as well, you can check out our social media for Green New Deal Rising. Just type it in on any of the platforms. Our website is over there as well, and there's a welcome call happening on the 4th of May at 6 p.m. Check that out. Come on through. We'd love to just meet you all, talk with you all, and hopefully get you guys involved with the movement as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Amit. That was brilliant to sort of make those connections between the health crisis and climate crisis. I think the more that we can sort of see the interconnections between these issues, the better equipped we'll be to sort of going some way to resolving them. So yeah, thank you so much. That was really interesting, and I really like that. Was the phrase, the era-defining Green New Deal is the era-defining issue. I think that's like a great sort of summary of the campaign. So I'll pass over now to Eleanor, who is a campaigner for fossil-free London, which exists to make our city as inhospitable as possible for the fossil fuel industry. She's been studying an MSc in Environment, Politics and Development at SOAS, researching ecofeminism, localism, degrowth and ecotourism. So I'll pass over to Eleanor for her presentation.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure how I'm going to follow two very inspiring presentations. I feel, great honour to be on this platform with both of you. So yeah, let me just grab all of my relevant screens. So yeah, first up, hi everyone, really glad to be here. As Emily mentioned, I'm a campaigner with Fossil Free London. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Fossil Free London and then sort of into our transition to the discussion afterwards. I thought I would share a few things I wish I'd known before I got involved in the climate movement. So as Emily said, Fossil Free London exists to make our city as inhospitable as possible for the fossil fuel industry. So what that means is that we work to support the struggles of communities around the world who live in areas the industry destroys to extract fossil fuels. And we also support struggles for social justice around the world where we can, believing that these fights are ultimately one and the same. We believe that the fossil fuel industry is actively and intentionally blocking the adoption of meaningful climate policies and must be fought and destroyed if we're going to have a chance at stopping the worst of climate breakdown and defend principles of social justice, as excellently described and elaborated by Emma earlier. So to do this, we organise and take creative action to tarnish the industry and attack its social licence. So we either do this on our own or in collaboration with other organisations and groups. These actions take place predominantly around industry events like AGMs, which is where companies sort of join together and discuss their sort of progress through the year, or places where industry uses sponsorship to boost their image, like the Science Museum climate exhibition, which is currently sponsored by two big fossil fuel giants, Shell and BP. Or outside the financial institutions who support the industry itself, such as Barclays Bank. So the group itself grew out of the fossil fuel divestment movement, which focuses on getting banks to take their money away from the industry and instead invest it into greener ventures. And we regularly take actions and hold events with a range of social justice groups around the city. So some of our wins that we've had as a group, after protesting Shell's Make the Future event, the company decided to move it online and out of the city where it had been held for years. And then our action outside the UK Export Finance building preceded an inquiry into the government's funding of fracking overseas. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about getting involved and staying engaged in a climate activism group. So I personally first found Fossil Free London when I attended an online event last April, which was hosted by the COP26 Coalition, which was called Taking Action. It hosted a bunch of climate groups who are planning actions sort of upcoming in the next couple of weeks, and I organised our participation in a Kill the Bill march. But now we, like other groups such as like Green New Deal Rising, we usually find people through social media, and we hold regular new member welcome calls to introduce them to the group and our campaigns. And then in terms of staying engaged, like being involved in any activity outside of your primary responsibilities, it can be quite a drain on your energy. So it's important to sort of work out how much your capacity you're able to give and sustain to the group. So one of the ways we support people to do that is we separate our activity into working groups, which include oil and gas. We've recently launched a campaign against the proposed gas field Jackdaw, which is off the coast of Scotland, and it's funded completely by Shell. We also have a Car Free London group. We have a Barclays group, and we also have some organisational groups like strategy and organisational culture. And then we have a meeting once a month where everyone comes together to check in and share what each group has been working on. I'm personally involved in the oil and gas working group, and I also do some sort of organisational process stuff like recruitment for a new paid member of staff. Will be coming very soon. So a couple of things that I'd like to just have a little chat about in terms of what I wish I knew earlier on. The first is understanding that your individual responsibility should not be prescribed to you, but decided on your own terms. And then the second being the importance of turning your fears and anxieties about climate change into positive action, which I feel like has been very well sort of explored by Sky and Amit, which has been really lovely. And then the last one is the role young people can play when they take up space in conversations around climate change. So first of all, in 2004, British Petroleum, or BP, the second largest non-state owned oil company in the world, hired the public relations firm Ogilvy and Mather to promote the slant that climate change is not the fault of the oil industry, but that of individuals. So it was there that BP promoted and successfully popularized the term carbon footprint, which you see everywhere nowadays. It unveiled the carbon footprint calculator so that people could assess their normal daily activities like going to work, buying food and traveling, as sort of like what that contribution was to climate change. But in reality, like individuals themselves are not responsible for the climate crisis. But instead, by joining together, we can build a collective voice and encourage positive climate action. Individual action, I believe, can be anything that motivates your sense of activism and allows you to feel agency over your own actions and the sort of collective actions altogether. So that could be including volunteering at your local community garden, attending a protest, reading about environmentalism, going to a peaceful protest, or eating less meat. But I think precedents set by the carbon footprint sort of concept and its sort of understanding in like regular media, individual action is often limited to the last act or similar. So eat less meat, or drink plant milk, or buy a reusable bag. Each of these implies a shift of like our consumption habit without really questioning consumption itself. I feel like Sky really elaborated that properly, that it's not, you know, your responsibility to just buy less plastic. It's that you really need to question, you know, why is that plastic being created in the first place, and how can we stop that production? So sort of leading on, eco-anxiety to eco-action. Eco-anxiety is sort of one of these concepts that I feel like has got a really kind of grown in terms of its awareness, particularly sort of after COP26. So a recent report entitled Young People's Voices on Climate Anxiety, Government Trial and Moral Inquiry, a Global Phenomenon, detailed survey results from 10,000 young people aged 16 to 25 across 10 countries. And it found that 84% of respondents were moderately worried about climate change. So I think if you are feeling worried about climate change, you are not alone, you are one of many. On the screen there, I borrowed Force of Nature's definition of eco-anxiety, which is feelings of helplessness, anger, insomnia, panic, and guilt towards climate and ecological crisis, persistent and intrusive worries about the future of the Earth. Force of Nature is a really lovely organisation. If you haven't heard of them, I do recommend checking them out. They're a youth not-for-profit organisation who mobilise mindsets for climate action, and they subscribe to the anxiety to action theory of change, whereby young people encourage a shift in their anger, anxiety, frustration, and desperation towards feelings of agency, determination, community, and vision. So what that means is, instead of trying to squash your feelings of anxiety, you should interrogate them and ask yourself how you can sort of better use them towards motivating climate activism. So what does that actually mean? So the first step is tapping into your resilience. So what makes you feel powerful? What makes you feel like your actions matter and that you can make a change in the world? And the second is building or joining a community. So I feel like Sky built this beautiful community of young people all around the world who really cared about climate and plastic pollution. And then Amit sort of really well elaborated the Green New Deal Rising and how this community is sort of growing globally. You are not alone, and there are people in your local community and across the world that are worried about climate change and want to do something about it. We are stronger together, and in terms of both our external impact and our internal resilience to carry on. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was sort of diversifying climate conversations. So the people who are most responsible for the climate crisis are the least vulnerable, and those who are least responsible are often the most vulnerable. So for example, in the US, so in terms of like global emissions, the US is responsible for 80% of emissions, while all developing countries put together are responsible for 24% of emissions. So this sort of, if you look at it on an individualistic level, a single American could produce the same level of CO2 emissions as 9 people in China, 18 people in India, 108 people in Zambia, 270 people in Uganda, or 540 people in Ethiopia. That picture there on the screen is all of the world leaders together at COP26 in Glasgow. And it's not the most diverse group of people. So this, the COP, if you aren't aware, is the Conference of the Parties, which is an annual international conference where countries come together to discuss climate legislation and their commitments to making a change. And the first COP was in 1995, before even I was born. But nothing's changed, you know. Emissions every year since have risen. So something sort of needs to change. The people who are making the decisions are not doing anything, or they're not doing enough. And we really need to radically question, you know, who is at the table and who is making the decisions. You know, those currently who hold the power, dominate climate conversations, are perhaps not really considering, you know, the people who are most vulnerable to climate change. Skye mentioned, you know, her local community, which could be the first place in the developing world with climate refugees. Are people from that community represented in climate conversations on the higher level? I think getting involved in the climate movement will increase the visibility of young people and bring more diverse perspectives to the forefront. So I just wanted to end off with this really lovely screenshot that I borrowed from Michaela Loach on Instagram. If you don't follow her already, she's really lovely. Definitely recommend following her. And she shared sort of her perspective in terms of how do you find your role in the climate movement. And she said that the equation is quite simple. You add what you have and what brings you joy, what is needed for the fight for climate justice, and what you're good at. And obviously this can change over time as you get older, as your priorities change, as your skill level in different things change. So in terms of things that are needed for the fight for climate justice, we need engaging with MPs and local decision makers, we need petitions, we need protests, we need meetings and debates, and we need accessible information, and many more things that I'm sure we can discuss later on. What you love, that could be being in nature or meeting and talking with new people. And then what you're good at, it could be things like writing, painting, drawing, making cup of teas for meetings, maths, if you're good at tracking finances, or graphic design. So yeah, thank you very much. It's been lovely to share my thoughts in terms of finding a role in the climate movement. And I'm really looking forward to having a little discussion with everyone. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Eleanor. That was fantastic. Yeah, brilliant to hear what you've been doing with Fossil Free London, but also some really helpful pointers and like things for each of us, I think, to think about in terms of what our role is and how we can each be as effective as possible, but also in a way that is sort of kind to ourselves as well. So I'll maybe kick us off with the first question, but if anyone has a question that they would like to ask any of the speakers, or just would like to sort of comment on or post to the group, either just if you wouldn't mind raising your hand using the sort of digital hand function, or you can just type your question into the chat and I can read it out. But yeah, just a first question to any of the speakers who'd like to answer. That obviously the topic for today was to explore what role young people should play in the climate crisis and finding solutions for that. You've all presented an amazing sort of array of ways that young people can get involved and are clearly having a huge impact. But do you think that this is actually putting too much pressure on young people and sort of shifting too much responsibility onto young people and youth climate activists? How could we counter that? What should people in power maybe be doing a bit differently? Feel free to jump in if anyone's got any thoughts on that.
That's a really, really interesting question. I suppose there's a few different ways to answer it, because on one end, we're not actually given the space to actually talk, right? The work opportunities that you need, or the spaces that you need to get into to be able to make change is not being provided to us, which I guess takes away your chance to play a role. But oppositely, that obviously does mean that we have to take to the streets, we have to protest, we have to campaign, petition and so on and so forth, which is more work. I think the interesting part here is that the work is unpaid usually, and it's a lot of unpaid labor that the youth are being forced to do. A lot of the time, climate activists, youth or otherwise, are from communities that have been impacted or are more likely to be impacted by climate change, which means that there's more inequality present there already. So a lot of them will come from poorer backgrounds, and then not being paid for their work. On top of that, it creates a vicious cycle. So I think that there definitely is that threat of us being overworked and overstressed. So that's a quick little point there.
Thanks. I think there's some really good points that you've mentioned in there. I think those are all as sort of factors that sort of add to this sort of inequality that's already present in a situation that's not necessarily designed to hear the views of young people who were sort of asking to find these solutions. Eleanor or Sky, did you have anything that you might want to add?
I was just going to add, in terms of, we sort of mentioned tokenism earlier, but I think so during the COP26 coalition, we saw greater visibility of young people in the blue zone, which is sort of the zone that kind of there's more like public engagement. Organizations like Force of Nature were attending, and they were sort of on these massive platforms talking about the impact of climate change on young people, and sort of what needs to change in order to increase the visibility of new ideas. But there wasn't as much representation when it came to actually talking directly with decision makers, and I think that's where the big change needs to happen. I think there is there's a lot of spaces now where young people can talk about how they're being impacted, but I'm not sure if young people are really being listened to, and really sort of given a chance to take part in showing sort of what policies need to change. And I think that's what needs to happen next.
Thanks, Eleanor. Yeah, no, really, really interesting. I think it's just so important to try and actually figure out what the sort of like practical next steps of some of these ideas are, and how that actually sort of can be sort of played out in practice. I'll open it up to the rest of the people who've joined us. I know a couple of people joined a little bit later, so obviously no pressure to ask a question, but if there's anything that you'd like to sort of comment on, or even just about the sort of general debate topic that you feel like you'd like to add in, that'd be great. Or someone's posted in the chat. Thanks, Joe. So this is a question for Sky, but anyone else can contribute as well. Are there any things that you think are really good or bad that organisations are doing to get young people involved and taking action?
So there's quite a few things. So Kids Against Plastic is a really awesome charity. I'm their chief campaigns officer for them, and Amy, who is the founder of it, she's just amazing at getting young kids involved. We've got members who are 3 and 5 and who go litter picking, and it's just a really supportive group. So Kids Against Plastic is an awesome group, and Surfers Against Sewage is actually working on a youth regional reps programme that I don't think they've fully released yet. It's still in the progress of getting it finished, but they're the good groups that are helping support young people.
Thanks, Guy. Oh, I'm definitely going to have to check that out. That sounds amazing, what they're doing. And a question in the chat from, sorry, let me just open the chat up there, from Charlie. So Amit, why do you think organising is such a powerful tool? Is it beneficial for individuals that are campaigning to get behind or highlight larger environmental activist networks?
Yeah. So I think, firstly, a really, really important question to be asked, because, we say get involved, but why? One thing that I found is getting involved with the right group creates such a healthy atmosphere to work in. When we look at the disaster that's facing us, it's terrifying, it's saddening, and all these negative words come to mind. But being with the right people really brings a lot more hope to that space. I mean, what Sky said when she said that she was being naive, I don't think that was naivety. I think that was hope. Reaching out to CEOs and saying, this is what I expect from you. And we do, when we attended COP26, I knew that people weren't going to listen to me in that very moment, but I do have hope that that made some impact in the larger scale, leading up to hopefully what ends up stopping this disaster that's facing us. So I think the first part is really being in a community, as I've already said multiple times, is really, really powerful. And I think an activist community has been that for me, and I think it can be that for anyone who is worried about the climate crisis. And secondly, again, as Guy said, you can be a drop in the ocean, but when put together, it has a huge, huge impact, right? So working together is always way more impactful. I think what's also really important to note here is looking at previous movements, previous protests and movements in general, having a singular person leading, although that can be really effective in inviting people to get involved with that one person, that movement is under threat of dying as soon as that one person leaves the movement, whatever reason that might be for. So if I'm the name for climate activism, the moment I leave, that whole branch of climate activism falls off. So we want to create a movement that's really flat, that invites everyone to work together collaboratively in a circular manner, and in what we call a regenerative manner. We want to give each other energy and get energy from each other to work together, so that if one person leaves, although it's not good, it doesn't matter because the movement continues without that one person. And if you give too much power to one person, I think that can hold danger in itself. That's kind of the mess that we're in right now. Power in too few people's hands is always a threat to the larger community. So I think that's why organizing is really, really vital.
Oh, sorry, I was muted there. Thanks, Emma. Yeah, really interesting to think about sort of like how the organizational structures can be regenerative, I think that's a really important term, both sort of on an individual but on a sort of organization level, because we can't, if we sort of burn out by putting our all into these in a sort of unsustainable way, that's not going to necessarily get the results that we need. So a couple of you, so Eleanor and Amit, you've both sort of mentioned about COP, especially sort of COP26, not, I think for most people, I can probably say not delivering the results that we'd hoped for, but we're sort of almost, I guess, halfway in between the next COP, sort of looking forward to COP27. So I want to ask each of you what's maybe one message, if you could sort of think of one message that you would pass on to the global leaders in the run up to COP27, what would that be?
Mine's quite simple, but stop letting fossil fuel lobbyists into COP. They have no place there, and allowing the continuation of the industry is going to continue to contribute to the climate change. So yeah, that's me.
Don't think I can compete with that one. That's actually the perfect answer, I think. I suppose a different one, for the sake of it, would be the people that are most affected should be the ones in the room, should be the ones making the decisions, which I guess is an ask for them. It's more for them to get out so someone else can get in. But I think that's really what's vital, because people are getting invited. The indigenous communities are getting invited, but like Eleanor said, with the youth community, they don't get put in the right places. I spoke to many indigenous people there, and they were all like, actually, we're here, we're talking to you, but you don't have any decision-making power. As much as this is a great conversation, you can't go ahead and make that change. The people that need to make change won't come over and talk to us, and we can't enter the room to talk to them.
Thanks so much, both of you. Yeah, really powerful messages to pass on. Sky, I know it's sort of put on the spot a little bit to come up with the message, but yeah, do you have anything that you would say to the global leaders, COP27?
Keep their promises. 65% of young people feel like the government has betrayed them, because the education minister in 2018 set the goal for all schools to be plastic clever by 2020, but the government did nothing to support that. So they just need to keep their promises, because we feel abandoned and they are betraying and they just don't listen. And like Greta says, silence is bad, but empty words is even worse.
Thank you so much, all of you. I think that's really powerful place to finish. We've got just 1 minute left, so I think we'll end there on those really powerful and sort of moving messages. So thank you, just to say thank you all so much for your contributions and your sort of really thoughtful and insightful answers to the questions. I've just noticed Joe did put a final question in the chat for Eleanor. So Eleanor, I don't know if you maybe could respond in the chat if you have an answer for that. Just to say as well, this has been recorded, so we'll email out the link once it's up on the Suntrap Centre website. So if you do want to watch it again or share with anyone, that would be fantastic. This is going to be a monthly series, so please do keep an eye on the Suntrap Centre website or on our Instagram page, or sign up for the newsletter, and we'll announce the theme for the next month's talk very soon. Share the link for that to sign up. So I guess that's all from me. Thank you all so much for joining. Really great conversation, and hope to see you at one of our next talks.